Todd the Todd Father. Todd Talks.
West Coast Davengers. West Coast Davengers.
Welcome back to the West Coast Davengers. My name is Dave. I am a comic book collector, a comic book seller, and a comic book expert. Overall, I love comics, and I want to share that love with you. Today we're starting a new series, and that series is called TODD TALK. And you know what I say?
When you see Todd, you buy Todd.
Now we're talking about Todd McFarlane, the Todd Father, the Mac Daddy. Yes, Mr. Todd McFarlane. Before we get into that, every Wednesday is West Coast Wednesday for my comic book claim sale right here on YouTube, starting at 7 Pacific. And every Sunday is, Sunday Sit Down, my live show about comics. We talk about comics. We have a book club. Sometimes I interview guests. Sometimes I have friends on. It is a fun time on Sunday Sit Down. With that, I present to you the first ever TODD Talk. Now, if you remember, way back when, like a year and change ago, I did an episode solely on Todd. It was very early in this channel. I really didn't think it out that much. I just started talking. This, a little bit more focused. How about that? For the first TODD Talk, we're going to be talking about Todd's Amazing Spider-Man run. Yes, that is a pretty legendary run. You might have heard that he did these nearly 30 issues on Amazing Spider-Man. Now, one of the things I want to talk about just real quick, this book is pretty out of print. You might be able to find a soft cover, but the hardcover goes for a lot of money. This is The Devil's in the Details, the art of Todd McFarlane, published in 2012. I snagged a copy from Midtown Comics when I was still living in New York. He did a signing there. They had all the books signed afterwards, and you could just buy it. There's a section where Todd starts his Amazing Spider-Man run, and you get some of the original art scans in here. This quote from Todd, it says, "This issue represents the next step in the evolution of my comic book career." And that's just kind of the tone I want to set with this episode. If you look at the issues that precede Todd's run, which starts at Amazing Spider-Man 298, you get some decent stuff. There's a couple of Sienkiewicz covers that are, I believe, in the 270s. There's obviously the Mike Zeck run in Kraven's Last Hunt. But other than that, it was kind of standard. There might have been some Ron Friends. It wasn't astounding or amazing or game-changing like what happens when Todd comes on the book in 298. 298 involves a storyline with Chance. I believe he was like a security guy or a mercenary for hire. If I remember correctly, Spider-Man convinces him to work with him because I think they were working in... I don't even remember the specifics, but I do remember the last panel in Amazing Spider-Man 299. What I like to think of the first appearance of Venom has his name, has his full body. It's such an intimidating figure that Todd drew. Legend has it, according to Todd himself, that he and David Michelini created Venom because Todd did not want to draw the black costume. He wanted to draw the red and blue. Now, the other thing that this brings in, and we're looking at Amazing Spider-Man 300, the first full appearance of Venom, one of the most sought-after Spider-Man books, period, and one of the most sought-after modern comic books. One of the other game changers that Todd brought to the table was the spaghetti webs. Now, Todd has talked about, and I believe it was in this book, that Todd cites a Michael Golden print that he saw, and it has an image of Spider-Man, and he's got the spaghetti webbing. Now, Todd took that inspiration and brought it front and center to the main Spider-Man title at the time, to the mainstream, and he changed the character forever. Now, you could say he swiped it, sure. You could say he stole it, sure. But all art comes from other art's inspiration. Nobody in this century, or the century previous, really did anything that wasn't inspired by something else. Now, maybe if you go back 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 10,000 years, you'll see original artwork, original music, original whatever. Obviously an iconic image, obviously an iconic pose that Todd mimics on 301, because then Todd finally gets to draw the blue and red costume. When Venom gets created, the black costume goes to Venom, the symbiote is on him, and Spidey comes back in the OG blue and red. Venom storyline starts here, but it gets continued a handful of issues later. But there is the return of Silver Sable right here noted on the cover. And Silver Sable is one of the characters that Todd and David McFarlane, who was the writer, they put her in and out of the story for the entire run that Todd was on. Silver Sable would show up, then she'd go away, she'd show up again. It's pretty interesting to see the use of female characters in this era of Spider-Man, because you've got Peter living with Mary Jane. She's a supermodel. She's getting acting gigs. You've got Silver Sable coming in and out. I believe the Black Cat's here and there. The rest of the beginning of the run, 303, 304, not super memorable in story, not iconic covers, but the interiors are fantastic. You get a lot of Todd inking him his own work. You get some Joe Rubinstein inking him. He was doing 2 books at once. I believe he was doing Hulk and he was doing ASM at the same time. He eventually left Hulk and continued on with Spider-Man until he left Marvel. There's a lot of fun books. I don't know whose choice it was, if it was McFarlane or if it was Todd asking McFarlane to draw some of the B-tier characters, but there's a lot of use of the Spider-Man B-tier villains in this run. But then again, coming from that, it is the A-tier Spider-Man villain in Venom. Obviously, it's not iconic enough to be a Spider-Man book, but they have to homage Action Comics #1. There's Todd doing his version of the first appearance of Superman. This is a polarizing book for a lot of people. Some people say they hate this cover. I always thought it was interesting and creepy and weird because you don't know by looking at it. If you're not reading the text, you're not realizing what's going on. And it's Chameleon, which is Spider-Man's first villain in ASM 1. Some people just don't like this cover. I've always liked it since I was a kid. I don't remember much about that storyline specifically. Like I said, some of the storylines in this run are just not memorable. What I think is more memorable is Todd's run in his own Spider-Man book, which is Adjectiveless Spider-Man. And we'll go over that in a different episode. This is the issues where the upstairs neighbor from Peter and Mary, is obsessed with Mary Jane and ends up having her kidnapped by Sticks and Stone. And there's a brawl in Central Park. I actually really enjoyed this. I reread this probably once every 4 or 5 years. I'll talk about this in a moment, but that's the omnibus that collects the entire run. Streak Force, kind of lame. Now we get into the non-lame. Sometimes I cite this as my favorite Todd cover and my favorite Todd piece of art. I've always loved Mysterio because this is my introduction to Mysterio as a reader. I'm like 9 years old when this comes out. This is also one of those issues where he hides the spiders, and by his signature right here, he puts a number of spiders and you have to find them. Now, this is a very important book for me for multiple reasons. This is the first time I ever saw Todd draw any of the goblins, and now he's got both on the same cover, Green Goblin and Hobgoblin. This was also the first issue I remember buying at an aftermarket price at a comic show, so, secondary market price, because it was in like perfect condition. I paid $17 for this book back when I was 12 years old. I was having to piece together the McFarlane run after the fact because I picked it up halfway through. I bought some of the issues new, and then I was buying all of the new issues when he had his own book, but I had to go back and buy a lot of this stuff. It was a lot of money, $17 to buy this book, but now I'm an adult. I can own as many copies as I want. No matter how old I get, no matter how my opinion changes on certain pieces that I love of his, this will always remain in one of my top Todd books. This is Amazing Spider-Man 313, and it's just, look at his Lizard. Nobody drew Lizard like this. And the only person to draw Lizard like this after this in that generation was Todd, because he brought him back in the Torment storyline. A beast, a complete beast, just like the Lizard should be. Always another memorable book. I believe the storyline is kind of the neighbor that is obsessed with Mary Jane owns the building and has them kicked out. But it's iconic. You see people talk about this issue a lot during Christmas time, obviously. And Todd loves drawing Santa stuff. He ended up drawing Santa for a trading card for Wizard Magazine. This one, super important to me also. The first issue I had bought of Amazing Spider-Man that Todd did when it came out. And I remember owning this book. I remember loving this. Not knowing who Hydro Man was. I don't think I had ever seen him in a comic. Don't think I'd seen him in a comic after this. Maybe Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. It's also the first partial cover appearance of Venom. And this is where Venom comes back. And this leads to this. Now, this is my original copy that I got signed by Todd probably about 15 years ago. And this is Amazing Spider-Man 316. You might have seen this image before, even on this program, right here. You're also seeing it right here, and you're seeing it right here. This is the Venom image. Yes, agreed. I see that person agreed with me too. This is the knockdown, drag out fight between Spider-Man and Venom. That's ASM 316 and 317. I don't remember much about this story. It is very cool to see Todd drawing Scorpion and Rhino. Justin Hammer on the cover of this one too. I don't remember much about this, but I will say it's pretty cool that if you've played the PlayStation Spider-Man game, they take some inspiration from these books because there is a part of the game where you battle Rhino and Scorpion together. So they are definitely associated, and I don't know if this is the first association of the two of them, but to me this is. So that's ASM 318 and 319. And then 320, kind of the beginning of the end. 320 is the assassination plot. Spider-Man teams up with Silver Sable, and Solo's in here, and Paladin is in here. Most of these characters I was not aware of as a young reader, but then they team him up with Captain America. Obviously, gives Todd a chance to draw Cap, and Cap's looking beefy as fuck in this. And then you get Sabretooth, which was huge for me because I was a big Wolverine reader at this time. And Wolverine and Sabretooth were at each other's throats. So to throw him into the mix in this, and then finally you end with this iconic cover of Red Skull and Spider-Man and White House is burning. And I love this as a kid, and I love it even more as an adult. You get the final Todd book of the ASM era, and that is ASM 328 with the Cosmic Spider-Man Nut Punch or Gut Punch to Hulk. And what's great about this is he knocks Hulk into orbit. And there's this just great page of Hulk in orbit around the Earth. It's kind of amazing. That's the actual full run of Todd in Amazing Spider-Man. It's truly what put him into the stratosphere for Spider-Man and what got him his own book. He inks a lot of his own work in this. You can see some of that if you're an owner of the IDW Spider-Man Artist Edition. You can clearly see the pages that Todd inks and what he doesn't ink. Some people inked him great. We've gone over the single issues. Now I want to talk about a couple other things that are essentials for me. They may not be for you, depending on how complete you want your collection to be. Now right here, we've got the McFarlane Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus, which goes through all of the issues that Todd worked on. They are recolored, so if you're not into reading the single issues and you don't mind a little bit of a remastered, recolored work, then that's for you. It is a little bit of a heavy piece, but you can put it on your lap and relax and read it all. The same as that would be like reading it digitally. You're going to get the same quality with the recoloring. It doesn't look as cool as this, but I think what an essential go-between is for those, if you're able to track down some of these original trade paperbacks. This is the Venom Saga. So this is the Spider-Man Venom Saga. So this has pieces from Amazing Spider-Man 298, 299, and then all of 300, 316, and 317. It's very similar to what like some of those Baxter reprints look like back in the 80s. They are not recolored to my knowledge, but they are printed at the best quality as I think what you're going to get. And I prefer this to this. It's also just depends on what's available, as well as this assassination plot. Same idea, same quality. I just want to show some of the differences and what you're looking at when you go for the omnibus. Now, cover-wise, I actually think the omnibus and the single issue for $2.99 look almost the same. They're comparable, or comparable, as they say. You just look at the clear difference on the first pages of some of this. There's less detail on Todd's work on the remastered, recolored stuff. What I really want to show is the last page of each of these. And then I want to show you what it looks like in the trade paperback. So we're going to skip to the last page, which is the first full Venom. Now, that is the image that we all know and love. That image, though, in the original comic. So which do you prefer? There's more of the blue tint on Venom in the remastered. The background roughly looks the same, but I just love the way that this looks. I do enjoy this. Don't get me wrong. I just love the original, but I think the best of both worlds is this. I just love the way that the ink ink shows up on this paper versus this paper versus this paper. Like I said, if you don't have the means to buy the single issues, you don't want to read the single issues, and you don't have the ability to find this that easy, then go with the omnibus, because it's complete. It's everything. It's just on this glossy paper that kind of, it hides some of the detail that we all want to see in McFarlane's artwork. For example, let's look at that last page in ASM 300. So the last page in ASM 300, it's a photo background that's been photocopied and colored. It looks good in here. Spidey pops out, but this looks superimposed. This looks like it's supposed to look in the comic. When we view it in here, it's brightly colored, like this omnibus. But I think just the background and the foreground work together so much better. What I do love about this image is that it was homaged in the most recent Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, because it ends with Tom Holland swinging in the OG suit through the New York City snow. Here's just another look at another trade paperback, The Assassination Plot, and it's the same thing. It's done on this smoother paper that's very reminiscent of the Baxter reprints. It just looks so good. To me, this paper with these books, far superior to any other printings of Todd's Amazing Spider-Man work. Because it's not newsprint, but it's not glossy paper. I don't know what you call this paper. Maybe put a comment down below. So that's just the subtle differences between the Spider-Man Omnibus, the original trade paperback, and then the regular issues. You don't have to break the bank looking for the single issues if you don't want. See, this looks far superior to this. I don't know if there are any other trade paperbacks from this run collected, but if there are, let me know, because I'd like to own them. So that's also great to have all of this. Now, this book, once again, out of print. I do believe there is a softcover edition that is a little bit easier to find, but the hardcover, extremely tough to find. Here's a little look into the devils in the details. So this is starting the ASM section of the book, and you can just see, like, some of these originals are beautiful. I would love to own one, but it's nice to just see. And this came out before any artist edition ever came out. There's the cover. Photo background on ASM 300. See, it's hard to tell because you can see in the original artwork that that is a photo background. But here, there's a color over it, so it's really hard to make out that that's a true photo background. But you can see the Chrysler building here. But the original artwork gives you a little more insight into it. And then here's that last page at 300. This is the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man that I was allowed to pencil and ink. He was penciling and inking the Incredible Hulk and having a pretty good time on it, and he wanted to do the same on Amazing Spider-Man, but he needed to convince Jim Salicrup, who was the editor. So there's the quote right there. He's talking about the black suit, how he didn't want to draw the black suit. He said, one of the things that he said to Jim Salicrup was that he'd been more than happy to jump on Spider-Man book, but the black costume didn't mean anything to him. It came too late in my career of collecting and paying attention to it. To me, Spider-Man was and is the guy in the blue and red. And it was promised that by issue 300, he'd be back to the regular costume. So yeah, this book is super in-depth into Todd's career. It's the best insight you're going to get, along with, he's done a couple of documentaries. There was one on the Sci-Fi Channel, and then there was one called The Devil You Know, which was kind of like a compendium to this book. You don't get to see a lot of these originals because they're either in private collections or in $1 million auctions. So between this and the artist's edition is the best way to see Todd's pure artwork. A couple other things in the Amazing Spider-Man realm. If you know about this is not cheap, not easy to find, but this is a reprint of ASM 300 in a mini comic that was made available in some Spider-Man DVD that came out, I think, in the early to mid 2000s. It's just something to have if you're a collector, but not if you're just looking to read. It's kind of pointless. Another piece, though, I do believe that every McFarlane Amazing Spider-Man collector should have is this Amazing Spider-Man Skating on Thin Ice. It's a PSA, like, against using drugs type of propaganda from the 90s. But what's cool about it, Todd doesn't do the interiors. He just does the cover. Just a fantastic cover. Always stood out to me when I was a kid. I grew up a big hockey fan. Granted, I was an Islander fan. Always stood out to me that he had a kid wearing an Edmonton Oilers jersey for a couple reasons. It's got the C on it, so it's most likely supposed to be a Gretzky jersey. Todd designed the third jersey Oiler logo in the 90s, the oil drip thing, and also was a partial owner of the team for a while. This is just cool for me on several levels. And then there's this. There's ASM 350, and let me show you why ASM 350 is important for McFarlane people. 50. This is a very important issue for me as a Spider-Man collector because I bought this new when it came out. I was not reading much Fantastic Four, so I didn't have a lot of books that had Doom in it. And so this was cool to have Spider-Man up against Dr. Doom. Eric Larson's last issue. But what's most important, there's a pinup gallery at the end of this book. And you get the Spidey and Mary Jane. You get Fantastic Four. You get Daredevil and Spidey. You get Solo, Captain Universe, and Cardiac. But the last page right here, Todd and Larson. Split pinup. You can see the shirt that I'm wearing while I'm shooting this video is the image on this, and this is where that image came from. Amazing Spider-Man 350, the last Amazing Spider-Man book that features Todd McFarlane artwork. I hope you enjoyed this first part of Todd Talk. I'd like to make this a monthly segment, and there's plenty of Todd stuff to go through. Next, we'll look at his Hulk run. More than that to look through. There's the regular Spider-Man run, there's Infinity Inc., there's his work on Batman, there's his work on some Marvel and DC stuff that was 1 or 2 issues here and there, his cover run on Marvel Tales Spider-Man, as well as you get into the image years. And I don't know what I'm going to do with Spawn. We'll go through at least the first batch of issues that he illustrated, and then we'll look at covers that he's done, some ink work he's done. There's so much Todd stuff out there, but eventually what this is going to lead to is needing to get Todd on this channel. I want to talk with Todd, and then I want to make Todd come back
For more Todd Talks.
I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, hit the like button, share it, post it on Reddit, on Facebook, get other people to join in on the Toddness. And don't forget, when you see Todd,
You buy Todd. Oh, you do. Oh, you do.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Done.
okay, I'm going to stop talking about this.
Shibbity-doo-bow, shibbity-yay. Yummy-nommy-nommy-nom, wonderful day.
The Todd Father,